Hey everybody, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I have with me a Web3 entrepreneur, S. Lee. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And today's a very relevant topic because I know it's how every home will become a stock, but it has to do with Web3 and NFTs and the crypto market. And as we've seen, there's a recent fallout with FTX, big scam, and billions of dollars lost, crypto market crashing and burning. It looks like people are going to go to jail. First of all, what were your thoughts when this whole thing kind of went down?
To be honest, like when it happens, you hate to see it happen, but it's almost inevitable. You know, when you see kind of an industry pop up much faster than any previous industry, you're going to have like the snake oil salesman that kind of run off and don't do the right things. So you probably have that same spectrum of people, and unfortunately the headlines it's much more interesting to talk about the frauds than it is the people who are doing the right things.
Right. Yeah, bad news seems to circulate a lot more than the good news for some reason. And that's just in general, right? The media loves a negative story for some reason. I mean, there is a positive that comes out of it, I think, is that we're weeding out, like you said, the snake oil salesman. We're weeding out the snakes and showing the supportive community that crypto does have, and how, for Bitcoin's price in particular was able to bounce at a low and pretty much stabilize, which shows that, we are potentially at a market bottom, and now FTX is gone, and the leverage is gone, and all those funds, and of course people are now out of luck, but we can now potentially move forward with less fraud, and now the community and the exchanges are going to really crack down on this kind of thing, and regulations are going to be coming, I'm sure, right? What do you think about regulatory issues that are going to come out of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think regulation is always good for kind of protecting people from being taken advantage of. And I think with every technology, you're probably going to hear about the downside before the upside, right? Like with AI, with social media. And I think it's kind of healthy that with something that could be so transformative that people kind of think about what it is and be critical of it at first, because that's kind of the way for them to really learn, right? So unfortunately, sometimes I say, like people, that's the only time you learn is when you feel some kind of pain. And so,
lessons learned, right?
Right. So whether you're in FTX or not, it's all over the headlines now, and hopefully, the people who aren't in it this will bring up their curiosity. They'll have discussions about it, and then over time, ask the right questions that allow them to kind of think through the problem and maybe even jump into the technology to maybe be a foil to what the headline is.
That's a good point. And the last cycle that we were in a bull market, NFTs were the biggest craze, right? It was all about the metaverse, and Facebook changed to Meta, and there were these virtual worlds like Sandbox, Decentraland. People were buying lands, and real estate was kind of a thing there because you're buying real estate in a virtual environment. And I noticed that it was just kind of exploded, and then of course it crashed and burned because, like every other thing that happens, is you get the speculators and people thinking they can get rich quick, and then it all kind of falls apart. What exactly do you think is going to happen with NFTs and real estate in particular going forward in the next cycle?
Yeah. So what's actually interesting with kind of like the virtual metaverse land is like I even looked at Decentraland in the early days, right? And I saw that a piece of land there in effectively what is a video game was actually more expensive than real land.
Yeah.
And I go, look, if there's people that are going to pay, multiples of what, 20, like a 100 by 100 foot plot of virtual land, if they're willing to pay more for that than actual land, then if we use the same technology to represent actual land, that has the ability to kind of, bring that market up so that the people who, have property are able to kind of realize the value more. But also with a digitalization or a token representation a property, you can break it up into pieces. So sure, if the net result is property gets more expensive, but you're also able to own a fractional share of the property. And in a way, we kind of already do that, right? Airbnb, you're owning a fractional share. You're buying, you book a place for a weekend. You own, those 2 weekends out of however many weekends,
Right.
that it can be used. So I think it in a way it kind of replicates what the stock market did for companies, right?
Okay.
So if right now you've been investing in companies, you need to have
You're
a
buying like 100 shares of Tesla or Amazon.
right, basically. And the technology really wasn't there to kind of do it for real estate. Um, and if you think about real estate, transacting real estate is actually perfect for digital tokens because when you transact real estate, you never actually physically bring the house over to somebody, right?
Right. It's just sitting in the location that it's in. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So all your real estate ownership means is a right to use it or a right to sell it, or you can kind of break it into component rights. And so you represent that with a digital token. It's almost like when you rent a property and you lease an apartment,
Hmm.
right? You're paying a right to use that property over the course of the lease.
Hmm.
And that transaction occurs through signing a lease and paying something, right?
Right.
So again, it's all done by paper and records. It's not done by physical delivery.
Which could
So
just be translated into like a blockchain and, tokens is what you're saying instead of using a paper contract.
exactly. And think about the Airbnb example. I booked it this weekend, but you know what? Something came up. And so I want to resell it, right?
Hmm.
There's no easy way to do that. But
With a
as a
token.
token, the same way you found the token the first time, somebody else can find the token and maybe they can even bid it up. Like, you find a property, you rent it ahead of some big event, and then all of a sudden there's a huge demand for it. You can
Right.
actually flip that property, flip that Airbnb for a profit. And it can be done in a way that Airbnb would be fairly agnostic to it, right? If they got a share of that flip, they'd be happy because it's just more transactions, more fees, and you as the buyer would be happy because you can get out of that position.
Yeah, and I'm curious because, I actually made a documentary about the real estate industry during the pandemic called Cutting Corners, and it just showcases the rise and fall of real estate, really, and horrible development practices. If we're going to bring real estate, which is highly regulated and highly, it's very investment heavy, right? There's
Yep.
billions or trillions in real estate, right? All the mortgage backed securities that happened with the 2008 fallout. We can go on and on, a whole different episode about that. The point
Yep.
is, how does Web3 and how do NFTs and tokens make that easier for people to get involved with?
Yeah. 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 I mean, so the regulation question always kind of comes up because people are like, okay, well, what does the NFT represent? And if there's a legal battle, like what
Right.
happens?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. How do you really regulate that?
Yeah, yeah. And so there's a way for this to operate effectively outside of that. Like this doesn't solve that question. And in effect, people were transacting real estate like in an unregulated way through Craigslist, right? Everybody has looked for apartments through that. Yet Craigslist was able to transact a bunch of real estate without kind of stepping on the toes of the regulators.
Right.
So all the legal and regulatory that framework doesn't need to go away, right?
Hmm.
You can kind of work with that. So you can kind of think of this just making all of this a much more efficient market. We sometimes say that like what we'd like to be is Craigslist 3.0 because with Craigslist, you can find the apartment you can go, but the payment part was never taken care of,
Right.
right?
Right.
That was always like the little, do you negotiate? Like, are they giving me cash? Is it a check? But with something with Web3 and the ability to effectively pay a cryptocurrency for that, it's almost like that's taken out that kind of unknown and that risk is kind of taken out because on both sides there's clarity. You buy this token, I'm giving you the right to do this. There's no negotiation, and the payment is in a way secure.
because there's a smart contract associated with the transaction. So like let's say I owned like a beach house in Florida and I'm only there 6 months out of the year during
Yeah.
the the cold months here.
Mhm.
And then the warmer months there, I want to rent that out, but I don't want to use Airbnb. So you're saying I could create a token or work with a company like yours. You would then get the token out to the people who want to rent the property week by week using a token and a smart contract so that when they arrive to the place, they have to like submit the token or something. And then the smart contract immediately releases the funds into my cryptocurrency wallet. Is that kind of how the process would go?
Yeah, yeah, and you can kind of think about even a future where like the door locks, right, automatically looked up the token and saw
Okay.
whether the person who came in, they can unlock it with their phone if they have that particular token, right?
Interesting. Or
So,
NFT, or like an NFT maybe.
okay. Yeah, like an NFT. And so it kind of cuts out a lot of the kind of administrative middlemen. And that's to say, like, there is a value for Airbnb because, like, at the end of the day, if there's a dispute, they're going to try to make you whole.
Hmm.
There's reputation management and all of that. But an introduction like this, which could work with Airbnb very well, is it just creates an alternative to Airbnb. And if Airbnb is going to charge 10%, they're going to have to prove their value because if you
Hmm.
can do it with an NFT for 1% without the represent, the reputation management and making somebody whole again, right? Like maybe you can argue Airbnb should be 2% and 1% should be on the NFT side, so that you can kind of get all the benefits of the transactions, the security, the secondary market, without kind of compromising on anything.
Yeah, I guess that would be the main question is the customer service aspect. Like if I show up to one of these properties with my NFT on my phone, scans it, lets me in, and the place is a mess and it's not what I ordered or whatnot, how would I get reimbursed or compensated? Would I just get my funds back and then somehow I have to go get a hotel or something? Or like, what would happen in a case like that? How would you protect users using this process?
Well, in that sense, like whether the token was involved, you're still going to run into that problem, right? If you go
Yeah,
to
of
an
course.
Airbnb and so it would be kind of like if Airbnb adopted this whole token system,
Hmm.
say we don't want to handle the dollars, the transactions.
Right.
We're just going to make sure that's the case. That like you're going to get there, and then if the whole thing's a mess, I can kind of back out. So they can be a part of that process. And then if they adopt it and say, hey, look, we're going to do the managing of the token system and everything, they can take that 1% and say, hey, like I'll refund you, all of it and not take a cut.
Nice.
Uh,
I
but
like that.
yeah, it just allows, I think the discussions on NFTs and tokens and how it's been used so far has done a lot of the utility
Hmm.
a disservice because
Yeah.
people think of the speculation value as opposed to the utility value.
Because they see the bored apes going for $1 million now, crashing down to whatever they are now or whatever, and all these NFTs popping up with the art, and people are like, "Why are people paying $100,000 for a JPEG of a rock?" So
Right.
I can understand why people are skeptical. But what are we missing in the future? Like, what do you see as a trend going forward from now? Because the next cycle will be 2024, 25, 26, etc. What do you see going forward in this space, real estate, NFTs, and blockchain and whatnot?
Well, look at it this way. Like, so I'm a digital nomad and I live effectively in a couple of places, and on friends' couches sometime, right? And I would always joke that like, hey, I would actually pay you for this, and it actually make me feel better when I crashed, right? So I think there's this kind of trend where people aren't staying in one place anymore, and this is kind of a
Hmm.
way to
Okay.
allow them to have multiple places and places on demand and have a system where both my friend and I don't kind of have to worry about the logistics, and the technology just allows me to basically maybe it's book nights on their couches,
Right.
right? So I think the trend is towards kind of fractionalizing real estate into kind of usage. There's some people who invest in real estate for appreciation reasons, right?
Hmm.
And maybe can't buy a house outright right now. But if that house was represented as 100 or 1,000 tokens, they're able to to own a
Buy
share.
as many as they can afford.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And so like it kind of makes every person who interacts with real estate an owner in a way.
Hmm.
And you know,
I
some
like
would
that.
argue, yeah, yeah.
It's a
Like,
good idea. Bringing real estate to the masses in a way that was never been able to be done before, using fractional tokens and the blockchain and NFTs. I mean, it makes sense to me. Um, I think that we're probably going to see more of this in the future, coming from your company. Tell people where they can find out more about you, and if you have any products or services you want to mention. And yeah,
yeah, they can find us at on our website. It's fractalprop.com. Um, yeah, and it's still early days for Web3 NFTs, and we're kind of hoping, that by doing some of this, like it'll take time to get up to scale, but by doing this, like it opens up people's minds to the possibilities, and then we leave it to the people to kind of figure out how to use the platform.
agreed, 100%. And you have a discount code STRAP for a free expedited minting and listing of your property. So if you own a house or another property, you can get a free listing on your site, fractalprop.com. S. Lee, thanks for coming, man. This was very awesome. And hopefully people stay safe out there in the crypto markets.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Buy tokens with real assets that are backing it.
Exactly. All right. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next episode.